Welcome everyone. My name is Cindy Tevens. I'm author of The Happiness Lie and Alchemy, How to Feel Good No Matter What. I'm here tonight with my good friend David Fishman, and we're going to talk about what happened to me in the woods that altered my life. And before that, what happened to me in the midst of intense pain and suffering in 2009. And how that altered my life completely. So basically, I was, and I have a technical problem. One
I
moment.
hear you. I hear you perfectly here. I see you and hear you.
I have a big echo. I hear myself. I have to turn that off. A little technical challenge here, just to test us. I'm closing down some things, so that will stop. I don't know where it's coming from. Okay, I think it's gone. Ah, silence. It's the same thing that happened to me in the midst of suffering. You see, I was denied the love that I thought I had to have, and I went through weeks of intensive pain and suffering, debilitating, really, crying on the bed. I went from, I want, and that was hurting so badly, to, oh, yeah, but you don't have. This was the battle that was going on in my mind. I want this, I want this. Yeah, but you don't have this, was the answer. And it seemed like if I didn't have it, I couldn't feel good, and I was just relegated to this pain that I didn't know what was causing it or how to stop it. And I came to a certain point because years prior, my father had suffered so severely that he became severely depressed. And he became so depressed that he actually committed suicide. And when I left the hospital that day, after we pulled life support, I promised him that it would not be for nothing. And I didn't know what that meant exactly. I just knew that his suffering, the family's suffering, my suffering, would not be for nothing. And that I would find out what that meant. And it was 6 years later, in the middle of my own unrelated suffering, that the first major breakthrough, the first aha happened. And so there I was with this battle of wanting and not having, and wanting and not having, and wanting and not having. And I came to an end because I couldn't take the pain anymore. And the thought of suicide arose. But because I'd promised Dad that his suffering would not be for nothing, that was out of the question. So I had no way out, no known way out at that time. Because prior to that, the way out we all have, or did have, or some people do have, is to blame other people, or other things for their pain. He did this, she did that, I don't have this, I should have that. And if you can blame someone else, sometimes you get a little teeny weeny bit of relief, but it's not pure. It's not complete, and it's certainly not freedom. And so two things happened. I promised Dad, so basically I couldn't blame anybody, which to me is love. I wanted to give only love and have only love. And I knew that mentally, even if I didn't know how to embody that, which is what I hear a lot of my clients saying now. Well, I know that mentally. How do you embody it? And so the second thing was I came to the end of suffering. It was zero tolerance, no more. I was done, I'd had enough, but suicide was out of the option. So there I was, trapped in a box, not knowing what to do. And right in the middle of not knowing what to do, I just stopped. There was this pause. There was this silence, stillness, and I heard, You can give yourself whatever you want. Huh? Because I've been doing so much wanting of something else outside of me. And I thought about that for a moment, and I thought, well, if I can give myself whatever I want, that means it's not outside of me. And so I looked within. And for a moment, there was this tremendous relief, because everything I wanted was there. I found it. One by one, the love, the acceptance, the dignity, the joy, it was all there. And it was very powerful, because all that energy that was being used to suffer suddenly switched. It was an intense energy that just sort of was like it switched tracks. And it went from the pain into the love, the joy, the bliss. And it was mind-blowing. And then mind arose and said, yeah, but you can't feel good because A, B, C, D has happened. And other people would agree with you. And I went back into the suffering again. And for about maybe 30 minutes, I went back and forth. Because the habit and the belief in the mind was there. But the joy was here. And I preferred the joy, and I had come to zero tolerance. And so I would come back into that, even though I didn't know what I was doing and had no words for it at the time. But it was very conscious that this was happening. And then mind would arise again with something, yeah, but blah, blah, blah. And off I would go into the pain. And then I would almost start to recoil from the pain. No, I don't want that. I want this. I want this love, joy, peace. And eventually I was able to sustain it. And over time, over weeks, mind lost more and more power. It never actually had any power, but I was withdrawing my power from it. And so it was losing power. How did I do that? Because I was putting my power into what I did want, not what I did not want. You see, thoughts and mind has no power of its own. It's like the moon. It reflects the light. It has no light source of its own. It borrows the light of the sun. Well, you're the sun. I learned I was the sun, that I was the one bringing these painful thoughts to life in my experience. Nothing and nobody else was doing it. Nothing else was going on. I was alone, and here I was flip-flopping back and forth between pain and joy, pain and joy. Literally mind-blowing. And so I sustained the joy longer and longer, and mind lost more and more strength. And it's sort of like feeding the birds. When you feed the birds, they come. When you stop feeding them, they stop coming. I lost interest in those thoughts. I almost felt like a crazy woman sometimes, because I'd be walking down the road and suffering would start to arise. I'd notice it earlier and earlier, and I would automatically, like a knee-jerk reaction, seek joy, seek love, seek peace. I still had no words for what I was doing at that point. And I would burst out laughing at the powerlessness of something that I used to think was so powerful. So I could be walking along the road, deep in thought and pain, and then burst out of it laughing. If anybody saw this, they might have wanted to commit me to some kind of insane asylum. But eventually, I sustained this and went around in a state of love, joy, peace. I was like a child who had sort of suddenly realized, I'm in a candy store, and all the candy's free. So I pigged out. And after a while, though, that's actually tiring. And then I realized, oh, there's other flavors in this candy store. I can have peace. I can be calm. I can have stillness. And some time went on like this for about 9 months. And then what I call an equanimity settled in. An equanimity meaning there was nothing that I wanted. Imagine you're completely self-fulfilling, and there's nothing that you want of this world. I'm sure there's something in ACIM about that, David, about having no interest in the worldly affairs or worldly things.
Well, yes, there is. Uh, all those things that you did cherish earlier, because that seemed to be what filled your eyes and your ears, something that you want that you didn't have, coming from lack, that something in this world, and yes, usually it was shiny and something that was going to give you something that you didn't have, and maybe it was love, maybe it was somebody really just to talk to, but whatever it was something that you didn't have that you wanted to go out and get. Once you change your purpose and see that what you really want is truth, and you really want to know the truth of who you are and what you are, those things do naturally begin to drop away on their own. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, at that point, I actually didn't want truth. I just wanted to feel good. The irony, of course, is the truth feels good. And it was my desire to feel good that drove me. And I think it's a common desire that everybody shares. Everybody wants to be happy. Nothing wrong with that. How we've been going about trying to be happy, manipulating the outside world to get what we want, that's where the trap has been. And why do we do that? Because we believe in what I call the happiness lie, which is the belief that things, people, or events make us happy or unhappy. And it's just a belief, because if you look at the actual truth of it, if you look closely at what's going on instead of just looking at the bad feeling thought that's present, you can see the truth. And the truth never hurts. So I went around like that for, like I was saying, about 9 months. And equanimity settled in because I was completely self-fulfilling, meaning I found everything I ever wanted within. Because I say we don't actually want things, people, or events. We want the feeling we mistake them for. It's true. If you got a brand new car and you had absolutely no feeling, what you'd have is 2 tons of metal, right? But that's what you do have, is 2 tons of metal, because there's not 1 ounce of feeling in a new car. It's a confusion. We confuse things for feeling, people for feeling. And the truth is that you and I and everybody else has access to whatever feeling you want, regardless of whether or not you have the thing, the person, or the event. Not only that, but because we've limited our joy by, I'll call it object happiness, by believing that something's going to make us happy, we have a false hierarchy of happiness. So you can understand this. When you get an ice cream cone, you have a certain amount of happiness, right? But when you get a new car, you got a lot more happiness, right? A new partner, woohoo, right? New house, new job. So we have attached our joy to things, people, or events, and thereby limiting, in our experience, not in the factual truth, just in our experience of how much joy we can experience based on what happens around us and outside of us. What I discovered in that moment was I had this amazing love, joy, bliss that made no sense to the mind, because mind says that you have to have this, you have to that. You can't be happy because you don't have this. It can't be real, is what mind would have you believe. But that thought feels bad, and if you ignore it, you'll find that you're capable of so much more love and joy and bliss than you have lived or imagined. And in fact, it's been your imagination that has kept you from it. Imagination of thoughts like you can't feel that good. Oh, it's just a house, a car, a rock, a stone. This is why some people can't understand when someone has states of ecstasy from a tree, so-called from a tree. It's not from a tree. People are always looking to attach our joy to a thing, a person, or an event. And you are capable of unlimited joy. So we don't need to attach this. And when we do is when we suffer. And in fact, we use our attachments to create our sense of a person aka ego. And this person that has needs now has to suffer. Whereas when you surrender or relinquish or turn away from any attachments and all attachments, you find you are completely unlimited. So, I mean, the body was functioning. I went about my daily things, my work, but there was no sense of a need to grasp anything, no sense of a need to push anything away, because you're in a constant state of joy. Not object joy, joy without object. And then you wonder, well, what's next? Right? What matters now? Because before it was all about, as you were saying, you know, your interest is in this thing or that person or that event, and you're focused on that. And you're distracted by that, actually, so that you don't see the truth that is right in front of our eyes, actually, the divine truth. And so there was no more of that. And one day I was out walking in the woods when I had been contemplating what matters now, because nothing I did mattered. My career didn't matter. So I was left with the only thing that truly matters, and that is to know truth, to know God, to know the divine. And this was a burning. It wasn't just, be nice to know. This became a burning magnet, like a magnet was pulling me. And I used to go out in the woods a lot alone. Felt like I was being pulled into the woods. So I was spending a lot of time out there. And I was out on a 5-kilometer hike. But it took all day because I was doing some meditative walking. And I was having these what I called then, or what I called now, microbursts of joy. Back then, I thought they were pretty big. They were pretty something else. For no reason, or, you know, a leaf, a rock, or whatever. Gratitude would overwhelm and love would just flow. And they were momentary, very powerful. And I was having them all along this walk. And contemplating, you know, God. And it is said that you turn over a stone, God is there. So God is everywhere. And in this walking meditation, the question came, well, if that's true, if God is everywhere, how come it's not obvious? And of course, there's no, I'm going to have to mute you because there's a lot of noise coming from your mic at the moment. Sorry, but we can always put you back on. There was, the irony is that there's no such thing as a true question. Every question is a statement of what you already know, or a doubt. And so in that question, well, if God is everywhere, how come it's not obvious? What's assumed? What do I think I already know? That God's not obvious. And it hit me that it's so obvious. Everything, including the stone you turn over, is a miracle, is divine, there's nothing normal going on here. People go around in this world and life as if this is normal. And it's all a miracle. And in the next gap, because like with discovering joy, in this gap came the answer. God is the source of everything else, comes before everything else, is the source of everything else, is subtle. And boom, it was an explosion of love at the chest that knocked me to my knees. in the woods crying. It was so intense. And as I was kneeling, looking up, crying, I looked up and saw the trees and saw them as myself. There is no other way for me to explain other than as myself. So separation, self and other, it all fell away. And then the laughter burst out because it was the cosmic joke revealed. And I laughed and cried and laughed and cried and fell in the snow and laughed and cried and laughed and cried. It was like every cell of my body was being tickled from within. And it was like if you were a child and someone was tickling you and they wouldn't stop, you know, eventually you would start to hurt. But I knew I could never hurt. And I didn't know when it was going to stop, and I didn't care. It didn't matter. And even in that moment, I realized that this direct seeing, welcome back, Dave, this direct seeing, the laughter didn't matter, the joy didn't matter. There was something even greater than that. That it was that in which all of this arose and came and went. So even an experience of joy and bliss is temporary. It's still not the greater. And so I never clung to it. I never wanted more. It was basically over. Thought, the last thought, ironically, was, it's over already? And then there was a moment of realization, I can't speak. But then the recognition, well, who would I speak to? Because it's all me. And after some time of the laughter, thought came back eventually, but it was way over there. It was this faint little voice that I used to identify as me. And my immediate response was, well, I know who I am. Who are you? And no answer came back. Because, of course, that's not a who. So I saw the sun start to go down and realized the time must be passing, whatever that meant, and that I had a party that night that I was co-hosting. So I started to walk back home, laughing the whole way. Crying, laughing, shaking my head. There's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. Everything is fine. And then I dropped everything that I was doing. I had already written Alchemy, my first book, and even it didn't matter, and I let it go for 3 months. And I looked around, okay, so now what? I can do anything. I thought about getting a dog and going rescuing people out of falling buildings, you know, but my health wasn't good. I had an injury at the time, and so I didn't do that. And it's sort of, well, life goes on, and you make money to pay the rent and eat, and so what now? And I said, well, let me look at this book again. So I picked up the book, and I went, yeah, there's a few things in here that need to be cleaned out that are a little conceptual. And so I cleaned up the book and just went back to doing what I was doing, which is helping people end pain and suffering. And 4 years later, I actually started to talk about that experience in the woods. I tried to that night at the party with my friends, and I said, oh, you gotta. And I sat down, and I went, yeah, it's the most, yeah, forget it. It was unspeakable. Nothing I could say is it. I just try and describe it as best I can now, but that's still not it. The most we can do is point to it and point out the false. And so that's what I do now. I think you've heard some of this, Dave. getting a little bit more detail now, I think. I've got, you are muted and I can't seem to unmute you, so if you want to come in and chat. Hey.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that story. I have heard it before, and it certainly is an inspiration to all of us, truly. I think we all go through some kind of a thing where we do go through what I call a crash and burn, or we kind of like say, what's going on here? And those are actually beautiful experiences, unless, of course, we are afraid of them and we kind of look the other way, avoid them, ignore them, and say, well, I'll do better next time. Actually, they are there for us to experience, to actually look at, and then use it as an inquiry, like what is it that I have believed to be true that brought this to me. Nothing happens to us by accident. Absolutely nothing. This is the most perfect universe. It would make our computers really pale in comparison. The universe is this really very friendly universe, that computer, you might say, it's a friendly computer that actually provides us with the perfect lessons that we have come here for, and the perfect people, the people that are our people in our dream, you might say, or in our life, that see, in the Course of Miracles, it uses the word dream roles. You find that in chapter 29, section 4, and that everyone is doing exactly what it is that you have asked them to. No one can betray you except by your consent. So if somebody does something to you that you say, how terrible. Oh, no, it isn't terrible. As a matter of fact, it's giving you an opportunity to take a look at what thoughts that you've had on things like betrayal, or feeling rejected or unloved, or somehow you're all alone, abandoned. And those thoughts are in the middle of our mind at all times. We just don't want to look at them. It's really a fear of rejection. And yes, as long as you have that fear, guess what? In this world, you will feel rejected. You will feel that somebody has done you wrong. And actually, anyone who's ever, quote, done you wrong has actually been part of your cast. You're actually like central casting. Or central casting sent in the perfect person to do exactly what it is that you needed to be done, for you to take a look at the lessons that you came here to learn. So everything that happens is really happening for us. It's not happening or against us. It's happening for us. This is a wonderful line in the Course, in chapter 4, section 5. It says, all things happen for the greater good. This is always true, except in the judgment of the ego. And of course, the ego is that voice that we listen to that says, that should never have happened. That person should never have done that. And if you listen to that voice, you're going to get to be right, and you're going to stay stuck really in prison. It's like there's no way out of that prison of being right and seeing others as wrong. Somewhere, if you really want to get out of jail free, you have to use a different set of tools. You cannot look out in the world and make the world wrong. The world is doing exactly what you asked. It's up to us to use it to see what I have actually suppressed or kept underneath my own radar, thinking there's always somebody else who's doing it. It's actually, I'm doing this to myself. So I'll turn it back to you, Cindy.
Very well said. Very well said. I definitely enjoy and concur with that. I say that there is a purpose for suffering, and it's to wake you up. And it is it can be used. So it's a red flag, and it's also an opportunity. If you don't recoil from it, instead you can use it, which is what I show people how to do, how to use it, and to flip your feeling so that you flip your perspective so that you see completely differently. Villains actually become victims in your perspective when you do this, and that's why laughter quite often bursts out. So yeah, a different set of tools. I like that term. And what I call alchemy is definitely a different set of tools, which gives you, as some people say, a tangible way to do this, not a mental way to do it. Because what I found is when you feel bad, bad thoughts come easily and effortlessly. And when you feel good, good thoughts come easily and effortlessly. So you're a bad thought feeling when you're feeling, you're a bad thought magnet when you're feeling bad, when you're believing something bad. And the reverse is true. You're a good thought magnet when you're feeling good. And so people try, positive thinking. What's positive thinking? That's really taking a good thought and trying to force that down on a bad feeling. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever tried it, and I've tried this to the nth degree, it was excruciating. I mean, it was bad enough that I felt bad. In trying to do this, it felt worse. It was just completely impossible. So I gave up on that some time ago, and accidentally discovered in the midst of this pain and suffering that if you feel good first, then wisdom and good thoughts and knowledge come to you easily and effortlessly. This is why I call this easy forgiveness. You're not battling a bad feeling. If you're battling a bad feeling, you're trying to force a good thought on top of it, you'll quite often feel like a fraud because it's not in alignment, it doesn't fit. Your head is saying you should think this, and your whole rest of your body and being is going, but I don't. So it's an incongruency that just doesn't work. Yet, how do you shift your state first? And that's what I discovered accidentally. And it was through, this one question that came to me in the midst of that suffering. When I heard you can give yourself whatever you want, at first I went, okay, so it must be within. And then it begged the next question, which is, well, what do I want? And for a moment it was very funny. It was very, very ironic because I'm doing all this suffering for what I don't want, but I don't really know what I do want. It took me a moment. And when I work with people, it's the same. People are so good at knowing what they don't want. We've become good because we think that if we can just identify what we don't want, we can go out there and manipulate it and make it the way we want it, and now everything will be fine. Never works, right? Even if it does work for a moment, it doesn't feel pure, it's not complete, and you're still attached for the next go-round. So instead, in that moment, what I got was, give yourself whatever you want. So that's the first question of alchemy. That's where that came from. The first question is, what do I want? What do I want? Just to ask yourself, what do I want? And it may take some time to discover what it is, but you know you've got it because it'll feel like instant relief. Once you've figured it out, it'll be instant relief. And the answer should always be a thing, a person, or an event, because you want a thing, a person, or an event. But what we typically try to do is say, well, no, I'm going to be bigger than that. I'm just going to feel good anyway. I shouldn't want that. I shouldn't be attached to that, so I'm going to try and skip it. So there you are, feeling bad, now trying to be bigger than it and skip it. Again, incongruent, not going to work. So, for example, I was working with one woman who was in a group of women, and they were having lunch, and they were all nattering, telling stories, and she started to feel bad, and she withdrew. And I said, so in that moment, what do you want? She said, I want attention. She said, but I shouldn't want attention. So this is another rule when you answer this question, is you never judge it. You're allowed whatever you want. It's Christmas Day, magic wand. What do you want? Because the second question takes care of whatever it is you want. But if you don't look at what you want and try and skip it, it's not truly detaching. You're not getting to the root of the attachment. And so answer this question positively. It's not what you don't want. And I tell you, David, 9 times out of 10, when I ask this question in the beginning, people will tell me what they don't want. And then I'll say, stated positively, get them to flip it over. And sometimes it takes some time, because sometimes they really don't know. Or they've just been so practiced at what they don't want, because we have been taught to suffer in this society. I mean, from childhood, if you were crying and your parents didn't want to listen to you, what did they do? For me, they sent me to my room. The order was, if you want to cry, go to your room. Okay, well, I don't want to cry, but I don't want to go to my room. You're not giving me what I want. So neither of those was very suitable, but of course I had no choice. So I went to my room. What did I do in my room? Cried really hard, suffered really hard. But how often did your parents send you to your room to feel good? Yeah, probably never. So we have become really good at suffering. And something I've noticed since I've been working with people is it's even ingrained in our language. When I work with people and we try to come up with the words for what they want, even sometimes I was challenged. And I started to be curious about this, and I looked into the words that we have that are suffering, words that we have in our language that feel good. And we have way more suffering words than we do feel-good words. So it's in our language, it's in our habitual thinking, it's in our society, it's in our movies, it's in our media, it's everywhere you turn, you will hear somebody or something say, he hurt me, it stresses me. If you look closely, if you don't accept that as truth and you look closely, what you'll notice is it's never a thing, a person, or an event that hurts you. It's a thought about the thing, person, or event that hurts you. For example, I was working with a woman the other day who said, I was standing in line and someone just walked right in front of me. I said, okay, so someone walked right in front of you. Does them walking in front of you hurt you in any way? No, it's impossible. It was the thought about that. You see, this woman was black. And so the thought about that was, I'm lesser than you, you are prejudiced, you are this, you are that, all these thoughts, which all feel bad because they're all judgmental, and they're generated by you, not the other person. There's a lot of learnings that came with the realization of what actually causes our pain, and actually the source of our joy, which is never a person either. We've just confused that. If you believe a person's going to cause your pain, you're going to believe a person can cause your joy, and vice versa. Okay? So you can't lose one without the other. They both have to go. So the realization of your joy is within, and it's completely free, and it's completely unlimited. And your pain is within, and it can seem unlimited at times, and it's completely optional. So this is how pain, physical pain, is mandatory, because that's what the body does. It's an indication of something's wrong with the body, and suffering is optional. Thank God suffering is optional. I mean, it would really be hell if somebody could come in and make you put your attention on a bad feeling thought and make you suffer. I'll turn it over to you, David. If you're there. Maybe not. When you come back. I know you're there. Where would you go? It's always here and now. It's always here and now. And the other thing I noticed in working with people is that when a suffering thought comes up, if it isn't a judgment about something or someone, it's always about the past, or it's always about the future. Always about the past, or always about the future. And the past and the future are actually one and the same. Because what you're doing with the future is you're taking something from your past that you didn't want, and you're imagining that it's going to happen in the future, but it's all happening now. So Once you start to realize this, you can do many things. You can use alchemy to shift your state, and alchemy is 7 questions that shift your state. Well, the first 2 questions shift your state, and the other 5 questions open to wisdom and knowledge and information you didn't have before, other possibilities. And that changes everything when you do that. And the more you do that, the more you realize the silliness of believing a thought just because it arises. One of the habits we've had is believing a thought just because it's there. And we believe it even more if it feels bad. But just because a thought feels bad doesn't mean it's true. In fact, if it feels bad, it's not true. So I say, if it feels bad, don't accept it, suspect it. If it feels bad, don't accept it, suspect it. I'm going to turn it over to you for a moment, Dave.
Okay. I just want to say a couple of quick words about purpose. You know, there's a 3-word sentence, and of course, purpose is meaning. Purpose is meaning. Once we get our purpose aligned with the purpose of the universe, which is to remember the truth, things do flow much easier. They just flow much easier. But if our purpose is just to get a quick fix, something that's going to, maybe it'll give me a better relationship, a better spouse, a better job, a better this. That's the world's purpose. As you said, everyone wants to be happy, and yes, we do think that the things of this world will give us what it is that we feel will make us happy. But those are like temporary fixes, and yes, I'm not saying that it's a train. I'm not saying I am not saying that those temporary fixes won't give you, like, you get a brand new car. Exactly as you say, you have the feeling of this luxury. I'm driving this luxury, and I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling that I finally have what it is that makes me the same as everyone else. But that's going to go away. It's going to go away and go right back into that valley.
Yeah.
If you want that changeless feeling, which in the Course of Miracles, they do call it the peace of God. It's the peace of God. You can call it the peace of mind. It's an inner peace, and it's changeless. It's always there for us. And at the very beginning of a course, it does say, look, we're not here to teach you what love is, for that's beyond the scope of this course. Later you realize that you can't teach love what love is. You are the love of God. You are the love that you're looking for. But it says we are here. If you want to do this course, you are here to remove the blockages to your awareness of love's presence. The love is always here. It's like a fish. The last creature on this earth that will discover water is a fish, because the fish lives in water, has no idea what water is, but see the water and say, oh, well, it's water.
Water, what's that? Water, what's that?
We live in the love. It's there's nothing but the love. We are the love. But until we are willing to remove the denial of love, until we are willing to see what we have denied, we're going to keep coming up to walls. Some of them are real brick walls, and you're not going to be able to move through them until you become aware of what you have done to yourself. And we have done this. It's the alchemy that's going to undo it for you. But certainly, while we think, well, I'm going to get this quick fix, this is going to get me through the night, oh yes, I'm going to have a lovely vacation or whatever it is, after the holiday, you come back and you're facing the same thing again. I'll turn it back over to you, Cindy.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, you are. Because wherever you go, there you are. And what hurts you is you putting your power of attention onto something you don't want. That's it. That's all. It's that simple. It's that straightforward. We won't have time to go into it tonight, but we will go into the 3 powers that you were born with, that everybody's been born with, that A, you don't know you have, B, you don't know how to use it, and C, goes on autopilot. Just like your breathing goes on autopilot. If take conscious control of it. And now that I've mentioned your breathing, you might become aware of your breathing, because you are breathing. But you weren't before. And there's a reason for that, and I'll explain that next week, when we have more time to go into the 3 powers that you were born with. So it's not your fault. It's not your fault. This body was not born with a manual. It didn't come with a manual. And the generations before us have not figured it out to be able to pass it on. But instead, what they've passed on is the happiness lie. Generation after generation has believed that things, people, or events make us happy, and everybody walks and talks as if that's true. And one of the most outstanding things to me when this happened was I could no longer speak the lie. Once you know it's a lie, you can't speak it, you can't think it, you can't agree with it. And so there I was, surrounded by everybody else in the world who's living and walking and talking the lie. And so I had to learn new ways myself, plus with other people. So I would notice that even as a habitual thought or statement would start to come out of my mouth, and in midstream I would notice, oh, that's not true, and I would drop it. And then I would drop it when it's just a thought before it even comes out of my mouth. And then what that results in is a lot of quiet, a lot of silence, a lot of stillness. And when I'm in a group of people, I had to learn how to now speak. When someone would speak something that's a lie, that would say, well, this really stresses me, and I know full well that's not what's stressing them, I couldn't say that's not what's stressing you. But what I did learn to do was to reflect it back to myself. And this is all we can do. I get a lot of people who I work with want to help other people. Once they learn this, they want to share it, and they don't know how, because they can't do that. They're discovering the same thing I discovered. So again, bring it back to yourself. I would say, well, what I've discovered for me is that's not what hurts me. It's this that hurts me, and I don't have to do that. It's an option. And they might go, huh, and drop it, or they might be curious and ask more questions. So that's the way to approach it. When you see someone suffering, and this happens to everybody, not just me, because everybody has transcended something that somebody else hasn't. And then you see them and they're suffering, and you say, but if you only saw it this way, it would be okay, there'd be no problem. But you can't get them to do that. They have to do it on their own. But you can plant the seed and tweak the interest that, hey, there's something else here that's possible. And it's here for you. You want to add to that?
Yes. Yes. You really can't do anything for anyone, exactly as you say. I like to feel that I empower people to empower themselves. I empower people to empower themselves. If a person is not willing to let go of the past, there's nothing that you can really do. A person has to really willingness that I really want to have what it is that I came here to learn and have and to teach others, exactly as you're doing, Cindy. You have the experience, and now you want to share the experience, but you can't do it for others. You do have to have a certain amount of willingness. Willingness is really, well, I really don't know what's in my own best interest. I really don't. And if you think you do, well, you're really not willing. So you have to say, I really do not know what anything is for. Lesson number 5 of A Course in Miracles happens to say something that's really powerful. It says, I am never upset for the reason I think. So as you say, you really don't know why people are stressed out. You know that they're not really stressed because of why they say they're stressed, and there's always going to be something that you can point the finger. Well, if that didn't happen, then I would be okay. No. That's the disguise of the stress. The stress is always something inside of you. No, I am never upset for the reason I think, because I have chosen to listen to a voice that is not the voice of love. I'm listening to a voice, the voice of doubt, the voice of uncertainty, the voice that has no idea of who I am, does no idea of the eternal being I am, and thinks, well, you are this, you did well getting out of childhood and adolescence, and now you got to go make a living. You have to do this and you have to do that. That voice is not your best friend. And whenever you say, I do not know my own best interest, it's really about saying, I do not know, but I'm willing to say, I am willing to step back and allow my true self, my spirit, to speak to me of itself. And you will always know spirit, because spirit speaks in really very clear, loving, gentle voice. And it's not always a voice, it's a feeling. It's an inner knowing that you are totally cared for, that nothing can go wrong, that you are the perfect holy child of God. Yes. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. You're loving it. Tingles with that. Thank you, Dave. So yeah, you said knowing. I don't know what I think is causing my pain is not what's causing my pain. And I like to play with that and say, yes, that's true, and no, it's not. The content of what you think is not what's causing your pain. What you think is causing your pain, meaning not that you think, because you didn't call this thought to come up from anywhere. You didn't know this thought was going to come up before it came up. You don't have control of thoughts that way. If you could, you'd turn them all off. You'd never have a bad thought again. There'd be no suffering ever again. But it's the thoughts you choose to put your attention on, the ones that you, by doing that, say, yes, this is true. You are the one that's saying, yes, this is true, to something that is not true, and that's why it hurts. And so this knowing or knowledge is suffering. When you are in not knowing, there's no problems. When you think you know something is when you suffer. I just want to play an example of what happens when you use the 7 powerful questions of alchemy and shift your state, and you have a different realization than what you had before. Here's an example of a client who had such a realization. How does someone go from this
to rude, inconsiderate, selfish, disrespectful, blah, 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 It's almost like I won't let myself feel good. And that's been my world my whole life. I've been working with that for the last few years and really like, gosh, why won't I? And why can't I just let, or maybe I don't know what it feels like.
To this.
Oh my God. Funny now. Oh my gosh. Where is this coming from? Oh my God, where did that come from? Oh my gosh. That's funny. It was like I couldn't control it. I just have to come out. I can't stop laughing, Cindy. Oh. Oh my gosh. So what was that? Like just me like seeing the ridiculousness of my behavior? I don't know. Of the whole thing is like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah. So who was being, or who or what was being rude, inconsiderate, selfish, disrespectful?
I don't know. At this point, I don't know. I mean, my whole body just went, when I first saw it, it was like all this energy and the heat in my body. It was like amazing. I was like, what? It just came up. And now I know what you're talking about, because I went back, I was like, started reading your book, and I'm like, where is she getting uncontrollable laugh? So you could get this with anything, right?
Yeah.
She said you could do this with anything.
And just laugh about it.
Yep.
Silliness and all.
But, you know, I don't know. I don't really think you can do it. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, the laughter of realization, I call it. It's a joy. And this is why it's easy. It's easy forgiveness because it feels good to do. And it feels better. It just feels good. It feels relief immediately. And then it feels better and better and better and better. And so once you catch on to this, there's no stopping you. As she said, you just do it with anything. You just get to this and laugh about it. And it's very tangible. It's not just trying to use the head, which can, you know, engage the ego further and make things worse. So it's very, very powerful, very, very tangible, very, very joyful. I sometimes call it the joyful way to question yourself into the power of now. And it can be done anytime, any place. You don't need, you know, to be in any place or carry anything with you because the questions will always be with you, and the desire to feel good and to know only love, joy, and peace will always be with you. So having a tangible experience is what makes the difference. To sit and talk about it doesn't do really anything. And so this is what we're here for in these series of webinars, to open up the mic, to bring people on who want to have a direct experience of going through this and having the shift and seeing the power for themselves, because there's nothing better than that. So I open and invite everybody to come and email me if you would like to join us on call and have this experience, or ask me questions. You can do it live, or you can send me an email at Cindy. Actually, send it to info@gobeyond.ca. Info@gobeyond, GOBEYOND.ca. And I'm going to check to see if there are any questions just before we sign off here, to address any of those. And if there's anybody who wants to participate or have more involved questions, we will do them next week. Same time, same place, which is here and now, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anything left for you, David?
No, I think that lady nailed it when she realized that she's been doing it to herself by realizing that she wasn't allowing herself to just be relaxed and enjoy the present. And there was always a voice that she was listening to. So I just want to thank her for sharing that laughter with all of us.
Thank you. Yes, I thank her profusely. And we'll be sharing some more of that also later on. Maybe we'll actually show how this happens with the rest of the questions. There are a lot of people out there who are willing to let us do that and share with everybody else. It's a blessing.
Yeah. As the Course in Miracles says, in your gentle laughter, it is healed. So laughter is really the beginning and the dawning of awakening, when you can laugh at yourself. Thank you so much, Cindy.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate your time tonight, and everybody who's watching and listening, and I hope to see you next week. Until then, enjoy the joy just because you can.